My name is Amelia Harrington, and I'm 29 years old. 3 years ago, I walked away from my family and never looked back. I had built my own life as a software engineer in Seattle, far from my parents' Boston estate and their precious golden child, my sister Cassandra. Then came the call that changed everything. My parents had died in a car accident, and their lawyer needed me at the reading of the will. I almost didn't go. Why would I? They had signed everything over to Cassie years ago. Or so I thought. Before I tell you how I walked into that lawyer's office and changed my life forever, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and hit subscribe to join my journey of reclaiming what was rightfully mine. Growing up in suburban Boston, I never wanted for material things. My parents, Harold and Eleanor Davidson, had built Davidson Properties into one of the most successful real estate development companies in New England. Our 5-bedroom colonial sat on 3 acres of manicured lawn. We had a pool, tennis court, and even a small guest house. From the outside, we were the picture-perfect American family. But inside those walls, the dynamic was always clear. Cassandra, my sister who was 2 years older than me, was the star. The favorite. The chosen one. It started with small things. At Christmas, Cassie would get the expensive doll she'd been begging for all year, while I received educational toys my parents thought would develop my potential. On birthdays, Cassie's parties were elaborate affairs with pony rides and professional entertainers. Mine were modest gatherings with a simple cake and a few friends from school. "We're just respecting your different personalities," Mom would say when I asked why Cassie's 10th birthday involved renting out an entire skating rink while my 10th was celebrated with pizza in our kitchen. "Cassie needs more social stimulation. You're more introverted." That was their explanation for everything. Different personalities, different needs, different potentials. In 3rd grade, I won the regional spelling bee, beating kids 3 grades above me. My parents attended but left immediately after to get to Cassie's soccer game. "It's just a spelling contest," Dad said. "Cassie's team is counting on her." When I brought home straight A's, the response was always, "That's expected of you, Amelia." When Cassie managed to pull a B- in algebra after nearly failing, my parents took her out for a celebratory dinner at the city's finest restaurant. "You have to understand your sister struggles with math," Mom explained when I asked why my achievements were taken for granted while Cassie's mediocrity was celebrated. "We need to encourage her when she puts in effort." I threw myself into academics, thinking maybe if I was exceptional enough, they'd finally see me. I joined every academic club, entered every competition, graduated valedictorian. At my graduation speech, I looked out to see my parents checking their watches. Cassie had an equestrian competition that afternoon. MIT accepted me with a partial scholarship. I needed my parents' help for the remainder, but they balked. Business school would be more practical, Dad insisted. "You could join the family company after graduation." "But I want to study computer science," I argued. "The tech industry is the future." Mom's lips thinned. "Amelia, we've already discussed this. Cassandra will be attending Wharton in the fall. She'll be the one taking over Davidson Properties eventually. You need to be realistic about your place in the family." That was the first time they'd stated it so plainly. Cassie would inherit everything. It had been decided long ago. I took out student loans. I worked part-time jobs. I ate ramen and lived in a tiny apartment with 3 roommates, and I excelled. By senior year, I had job offers from major tech companies. I chose a promising startup in Seattle, partly for the opportunity and partly for the distance from Boston. I built a life there, made friends, advanced in my career, found success on my own terms. Then came my cousin Natalie's wedding 3 years ago. I couldn't avoid returning home. My parents insisted I stay at the family house rather than a hotel. "We never see you anymore," Mom complained. "Would it kill you to spend time with your family?" The dinner the night before the wedding was when everything exploded. Dad clinked his glass and stood, beaming with pride. "We have an announcement," he said. "As you all know, Davidson Properties has been growing steadily. We're expanding into commercial developments along the eastern seaboard. And it's time we start planning for the future. So we're pleased to announce that Cassandra will be officially joining the company as Executive Vice President of Development, with the intention of taking over as CEO when I retire in 5 years. Everyone applauded. Cassie smiled modestly, though I could see the triumph in her eyes when she glanced my way. "What about Amelia?" asked my Aunt Grace. "Will she be joining too?" Mom laughed lightly. "Oh, Amelia has her computers in Seattle. She's made it clear she's not interested in real estate." I sat there, frozen. They had never asked me. Never even considered that I might want a place in the family business. They had been grooming Cassie for years while telling me I needed to be realistic about my place. I excused myself from the table and went to the study to catch my breath. Dad followed me. "You know this is how it had to be," he said, not unkindly. "Cassie has the personality for this business. The charm, the social skills. You're brilliant, Amelia, but you're too analytical, too rigid. This business is about relationships, intuition. Your sister feels the market. You analyze it to death." "You never gave me a chance," I said quietly. "You decided when we were children that she was the heir and I was the spare. And you've been justifying it ever since." Dad's face hardened. "This attitude is exactly why you wouldn't succeed in this business. You take everything so personally. Business isn't personal. Except when it's family business," I replied. "Then it's nothing but personal." That was the last real conversation I had with my father. The next day at the wedding, I maintained a polite facade. The day after, I flew back to Seattle and blocked my parents' numbers. 3 years of silence followed. 3 years of building my life without the weight of their expectations and disappointments. Until the call from Mr. Thornton, the family lawyer, informing me that Harold and Eleanor Davidson had died when their car skidded off an icy road on the way home from their anniversary dinner. And that, despite everything, I needed to be present for the reading of the will. The dinner that ended my relationship with my family wasn't just about the business announcement. It was the culmination of a lifetime of feeling invisible in my own home. After Dad followed me to the study and told me I didn't have what it took to succeed in the family business, Cassie appeared in the doorway, champagne flute in hand. "Don't be dramatic, Amy," she said, using the nickname she knew I hated. "It's not like this is a surprise to anyone. I've been interning at the company since high school." "While I was actively discouraged," I replied. She rolled her eyes. "You never showed interest. You were always buried in your coding projects or whatever." "Because every time I expressed interest in the business, I was told it wasn't my strength," I said. "It's hard to show interest when you're constantly being redirected." Cassie sighed dramatically. "Look, we all have our lanes. Mine is business. Yours is technical stuff. That's just how it is." Dad nodded. "Cassandra has been preparing for this her entire life. She majored in business. She has the right connections. She understands how things work in our world." "Because you gave her those opportunities," I said. "You sent her to cotillion and country club events. You introduced her to your business associates. You took her to development sites. You never once offered me those same chances." Mom had entered the room by then. "Amelia, please. You're making a scene. This is Cassandra's moment. Can't you just be happy for your sister?" That was always the refrain. Be happy for your sister. Don't overshadow your sister. Don't make this about you. I looked at the three of them standing there, Dad irritated, Mom worried about appearances, Cassie smugly triumphant, and something inside me finally broke. "I'm leaving," I said quietly. "Don't be ridiculous," Mom said. "The wedding is tomorrow." "I'll be at the wedding. I'll smile for the photos. I'll toast the happy couple. And then I'm done. I'm done pretending we're a loving family when I've never been more than an afterthought to all of you. Now you're just being childish," Dad snapped. "No, I'm finally being honest. You've made your choice clear. Cassie gets everything, the attention, the opportunities, the business, probably eventually this house. Fine. She can have it all. But she doesn't get to have me too. I won't stick around to watch the Cassandra show anymore. I walked out of the study and up to my old bedroom. The next day, I fulfilled my obligations at the wedding. I hugged the bride, danced with my cousins, and avoided my immediate family as much as possible. The day after, I was on a plane back to Seattle. Mom called and left tearful voicemails for a few weeks. Dad emailed a terse message about taking time to cool off. Cassie sent a text that read, "Way to make everything about you, as usual." I changed my phone number. I created email filters to send their messages to a folder I never checked. I threw myself into my work and tried to rebuild my life without the shadow of familial disappointment hanging over me. My friend Diane became my support system in Seattle. She invited me to holidays with her family. Her husband Patrick taught me to rock climb, a hobby I discovered I loved. I built a chosen family around me of people who valued me for exactly who I was. Sometimes news would filter through to me. A mutual friend mentioned Cassie's promotion. An old classmate congratulated me on my parents' new development project. I nodded and changed the subject. The strangest part was discovering, through an accidental run-in with my mother's cousin at a conference in San Francisco, that my parents had been telling people I had moved on from the family. "They said you found the family business too constraining," she told me, looking uncomfortable. "That you needed to forge your own path and didn't want the burden of family expectations. Eleanor said you're very independent and they're respecting your space." They had rewritten our estrangement as my choice. My rejection. They'd turned themselves into the understanding parents, giving their wayward daughter room to find herself. I laughed bitterly that night in my hotel room. Of course they had. Anything to maintain the facade of the perfect family. Anything to avoid admitting they had driven their younger daughter away through years of favoritism and dismissal. When Grace, my aunt, called to tell me about the accident, I felt nothing at first. Just a hollow emptiness where grief should be. They were coming home from celebrating their 35th anniversary, she said, her voice breaking. The roads were icy. Harold lost control of the car on a curve. They were killed instantly. "I'm sorry," I said automatically. "The funeral is on Saturday," she continued. "Cassandra is handling the arrangements. She wasn't sure if you'd want to be involved." Of course she wasn't. Cassie had probably been enjoying having our parents all to herself these past 3 years. "I'll book a flight," I said, surprising myself. 2 days later, I received the call from Mr. Thornton. "Miss Harrington," he said, his voice formal. "I'm the Davidson family attorney. I understand you'll be in Boston for the funeral. We'll need you to stay for the reading of the will on Monday morning. Is that necessary?" I asked. I assumed everything would go to Cassandra. There was a pause. "It would be in your best interest to attend," he said carefully. "There are matters that concern you directly." I almost declined. What was the point? But something in his tone made me curious. "Fine," I said. Monday morning. What I didn't know then was that Monday would change everything. That the carefully constructed narrative of my family would crumble. That the truth my parents had hidden for years would finally come to light. And that I would walk into that lawyer's office and watch my sister's smug smile disappear as her carefully laid plans fell apart. Landing in Boston felt like stepping back in time. The familiar skyline, the distinctive accent of the taxi driver, even the particular quality of the winter light, it all brought memories flooding back, both good and bad. I had declined to stay at the family home, despite Aunt Grace's insistence. Instead, I was staying with Diane's parents, who still lived in the suburb where we grew up. They welcomed me with quiet sympathy and gave me space to process my complicated emotions. "You can stay as long as you need," Mrs. Bennett said, showing me to their guest room. "We always thought of you as another daughter." I thanked her, throat tight with unexpected emotion. The Bennetts had always treated me with a warmth my own parents rarely showed. They'd attended my science fairs and piano recitals when my parents were busy with Cassie's events. The day before the funeral, I decided to visit my old neighborhood. I drove past our family home, a stately colonial set back from the road. The sight of it sent a pang through me, not of longing exactly, but of something unresolved. I continued to the local coffee shop, the daily grind, where I used to study during high school. It had barely changed. Same worn leather armchairs, same chalkboard menu, same smell of coffee and cinnamon. I was waiting for my order when I heard a familiar voice. Amelia? Is that you? I turned to see Kate Fletcher, my high school chemistry lab partner. We'd never been close, but we'd been friendly. Kate, hi, I said, accepting her quick hug. How are you? I'm good. Teaching chemistry at our old high school now, if you can believe it. She paused, her expression shifting to concern. I was so sorry to hear about your parents. Just awful. Thank you, I said automatically. She hesitated. I was surprised to hear you were coming back. After everything. I frowned. What do you mean? Kate looked uncomfortable. Oh, after you moved away. Your parents mentioned you'd moved on from family life. Cassandra said you'd found your own path in tech and didn't really look back. She lowered her voice. There were rumors you had some kind of breakdown after college, that you couldn't handle the pressure of joining the family business. My coffee order was called, giving me a moment to control my expression. When I turned back to Kate, I kept my voice neutral. Interesting version of events. Kate seemed to sense she'd stepped into dangerous territory. Well, you know how people talk. I'm sure it was all exaggerated. I'm sure, I agreed coolly. Nice seeing you, Kate. I left the coffee shop seething. A breakdown? Couldn't handle the pressure? I had graduated top of my class from MIT and helped build a successful tech startup from the ground up. Meanwhile, Cassie had been handed a vice presidency at our parents' company without having to prove herself. My next stop was the cemetery. I needed to see my parents' graves before the funeral to have a private moment with my complicated feelings. Their plots were in the family section of Oakwood Cemetery, under a large oak tree. The freshly turned earth was covered with flowers, roses, my mother's favorite. I stood there, waiting for grief to hit me. Instead, I felt anger, regret, and a profound sense of loss, not just for their deaths, but for the relationship we never had. I wish you had seen me, I whispered. Really seen me. They did, in the end. I whirled around to see an elderly woman standing nearby. It took me a moment to recognize Martha Winters, my parents' longtime housekeeper who had been more of a grandmother to me than either of my actual grandmothers. Martha, I said, moving to hug her. Her familiar scent of lavender and lemon brought tears to my eyes. My dear girl, she said, patting my back. I've missed you terribly. What did you mean they saw me in the end? I asked as we sat on a nearby bench. Martha looked toward the graves. Your father changed in these last months. He was looking through old family albums, watching videos of you as a child. He kept saying he'd made mistakes. I swallowed hard. Did he reach out to me? He said he tried, Martha replied. But you'd changed your number. He sent letters. I never received any letters, I said, frowning. Martha's expression turned thoughtful. That's strange. He gave them to Cassandra to mail since she said she had your address. A chill ran through me. Cassie said she had my address? Yes. She told your parents you were moving around a lot in Seattle, changing apartments. That they needed to send things through her. I hadn't moved once in 3 years. My address was easily findable online. My company's website listed me in our team section. Martha, did my parents change their will recently? I asked suddenly. She looked surprised. I couldn't say for certain. But your father was meeting with Mr. Thornton quite a lot in the months before the accident. And once, I overheard him on the phone saying something needed to be made right. As I drove back to the Bennetts that evening, my mind was racing. Could my parents have had second thoughts about cutting me out? Had Cassie been intercepting their attempts to reconcile? I stopped at a red light and noticed I was near our old house. On impulse, I turned down our street and parked across from the property. The lights were on downstairs. Cassie was probably there, preparing for the funeral. As I sat watching the house, a car pulled into the driveway. Cassie emerged from the driver's side, followed by her husband Jacob from the passenger side. They were laughing about something as they walked to the front door. Just before entering, Cassie paused and looked directly at my car. Even from this distance, I could see her smile fade as she recognized me. She said something to Jacob, who glanced over with a frown. Then they went inside, closing the door firmly behind them. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Martha's words. Your father changed in these last months. He was looking through old family albums. He kept saying he'd made mistakes. I got up and dug through my suitcase until I found the one family photo I'd kept after the estrangement, a picture from a vacation in Maine when I was 12. In it, we're all smiling on a sailboat, the wind whipping our hair, my father's arm around my shoulders. I stared at that image for a long time, trying to reconcile it with the man who told me I didn't have what it took to join the family business. The man who had chosen Cassie over me at every turn. But as I studied his face in the photo, something caught my eye. Behind us, barely visible in the marina, was a sign, Davidson Landing. I'd forgotten about that place. A small marina development my grandfather had started, the project that launched Davidson Properties. Why did that feel important? I couldn't put my finger on it, but something about it nagged at me as I finally drifted off to sleep. The next morning would be the funeral. And the day after that, I would sit in Mr. Thornton's office and learn exactly what my father had meant about making things right. The funeral was exactly as I expected, a carefully orchestrated display of Boston's elite paying respects to two of their own. Cassie gave a tearful eulogy about our close-knit family and how our parents had always supported both their daughters in finding their unique paths. I sat in the front row, my face a neutral mask, as she rewrote our family history for public consumption. I didn't speak. I accepted condolences with quiet dignity. I avoided being alone with my sister. And as soon as it was socially acceptable, I left the reception at the house and returned to the Bennetts. That evening, Mr. Thornton called. Miss Harrington, I wonder if you might come to my office tomorrow morning, before the official will reading. There are some matters I'd like to discuss privately. What kind of matters? I asked. It would be better to discuss in person, he replied. Shall we say 9 o'clock? The full reading is scheduled for 11. I agreed, curiosity overcoming my reluctance to spend more time than necessary on family business. The next morning, I arrived at Thornton Legal precisely at 9. The receptionist showed me directly to Mr. Thornton's office, a wood-paneled room lined with law books and smelling of leather and lemon oil. Edward Thornton had been my family's attorney for as long as I could remember. He was in his 60s now, his hair completely silver, but he still had the same piercing blue eyes and measured way of speaking. Amelia, he said, rising to shake my hand. Thank you for coming early. Please sit down. Once I was seated, he removed his glasses and looked at me directly. I wanted to speak with you privately because what will transpire at the official reading may come as a shock to some parties. I thought it fair to prepare you. Prepare me for what? I asked. I'm not expecting anything from the estate. That's precisely why we need to talk. He opened a drawer and removed a thick folder. Are you familiar with your grandfather's original trust conditions for Davidson Properties? I shook my head. My grandfather died when I was 3. I know he founded the company, but not much else. Jonathan Davidson was a remarkable man, Mr. Thornton said. He built the company from nothing, starting with that small marina development in Maine, Davidson Landing. The marina from the photo. I felt a prickle of interest. Your grandfather established a trust to control the company after his death. Your father was named as trustee and CEO, but with specific conditions about succession. He slid a document across the desk. This is the original trust language. I scanned the document, legal terminology, making it slow going, until one paragraph jumped out. Upon the retirement or death of Harold Davidson, control of Davidson properties and associated assets shall pass to the heir who demonstrates the qualities Jonathan Davidson valued: integrity, innovation, financial acumen, and commitment to ethical business practices. This determination shall be made by the trustee based on objective evaluation of potential heirs. I looked up. This says nothing about the heir having to be the oldest child. Correct, Mr. Thornton confirmed. Jonathan Davidson believed in meritocracy, not primogeniture. He came from nothing and built his success through hard work and innovation. He wanted the company led by whoever would best honor those values, regardless of birth order. Did my father know this? Of course. But over time, he and your mother developed their own ideas about succession. They believed Cassandra's personality was better suited to the business. I felt the familiar sting of that assessment. So they groomed her from the beginning. Yes, but about 6 months ago, your father came to see me. He brought this. He handed me a sealed envelope. He asked me to give it to you after his death, whether or not you attended the will reading. With slightly shaking hands, I opened the envelope and unfolded the letter inside. Amelia, asterisk. If you're reading this, I'm gone and I've lost the chance to say these things to you in person. That's my fault. I let pride and stubbornness keep me from reaching out properly after our falling out. Asterisk. I've been watching your career from afar. The innovation you've brought to your company, the ethical approach you've taken to technology development, the financial success you've achieved through your own merit rather than family connections. You are your grandfather's granddaughter in every way that matters. Asterisk. Cassandra has qualities that your mother and I valued: social grace, charm, the ability to make people feel at ease. But we were wrong to prioritize those over the core values that built Davidson Properties. Your sister lacks your integrity and vision. I've come to see that she views the company as an entitlement rather than a responsibility. Asterisk. I've tried to contact you many times over the past year. I sent letters. I called numbers that were disconnected. I even drove by your office in Seattle last spring, but lost my nerve when I saw you through the window, looking so confident and successful without us. Asterisk. I'm working with Edward to make things right. By the time you read this, changes will have been made to honor your grandfather's original intentions. Asterisk. I hope someday you can forgive me for not seeing sooner what should have been obvious from the beginning. Asterisk. With love and regret. Asterisk. Dad. Asterisk. I folded the letter, fighting back tears. He tried to contact me. Many times, Mr. Thornton confirmed. He was quite distressed when his letters went unanswered. I never received them, I said. Martha mentioned Cassie was supposed to mail them. Mr. Thornton's expression tightened. I see. That's concerning but not entirely surprising given what else we discovered. He produced another document. After your father's change of heart, we conducted an audit of company operations. We found evidence that Cassandra has been making some questionable decisions in her role as executive VP. There are indications she was planning to sell off key assets after gaining control. Sell off? But the company has been in the family for generations. Yes, it appears she had arrangements with Meridian Developments to acquire several properties significantly below market value. Meridian's CEO, coincidentally, is a college friend of her husband. I sat back, stunned. She was planning to dismantle the company? Not entirely, but to extract maximum short-term value at the expense of long-term stability. He checked his watch. The others will be arriving soon. There's one more thing you should know. Your father amended his will 3 weeks before the accident. The changes are significant and legally binding. What changes? You'll hear the details at the reading. But I want you to be prepared for Cassandra's reaction. She is not aware of these amendments. As I left his office to wait in a conference room until the official reading, my mind was reeling. My father had recognized his mistake. He had tried to reach out. And now, from beyond the grave, he was about to right a decades-old wrong. For the first time since hearing of my parents' deaths, I felt a real sense of loss. Not just for what had been, but for what might have been if we'd had the chance to reconcile. At precisely 11 o'clock, I was escorted into the main conference room. Cassie was already there, sitting at the large mahogany table with Jacob beside her. She wore an expensive black dress and a pearl necklace that had belonged to our mother. Her eyes widened slightly when she saw me, then narrowed. "I didn't realize you'd be staying for this," she said. "I thought you'd be heading back to Seattle right after the funeral." "Mr. Thornton asked me to attend," I replied simply, taking a seat across from her. Jacob nodded stiffly in my direction. We'd never been close. He came from the same world as Cassie, prep school, Ivy League, country club membership from birth. He'd always treated me with the bemused tolerance of someone humoring a child. Other relatives began filtering in: aunts, uncles, cousins. Several of my parents' closest business associates arrived. Martha slipped in quietly and sat in a corner. She caught my eye and gave me a small, encouraging smile. At 11:15, Mr. Thornton entered with two colleagues carrying stacks of documents. He expressed condolences again, then launched into the formal legal proceedings. "We are gathered for the reading of the last will and testament of Harold Jonathan Davidson and Eleanor Winters Davidson," he began. "Before I proceed, I must note that this document was amended 3 weeks prior to the decedent's passing. The amendment was properly executed and witnessed, and is legally binding." I noticed Cassie sit up straighter, her brow furrowing slightly. This was news to her. Mr. Thornton began with minor bequests, jewelry to cousins, art to museums, charitable donations. Cassie relaxed as these proceeded without surprises. She even smiled smugly when Mr. Thornton announced she would inherit the family home and its contents. Then came the business interests. Regarding Davidson Properties and all associated business entities, Mr. Thornton read, Harold Davidson, in his capacity as trustee of the Jonathan Davidson Trust, conducted a thorough evaluation of potential successors in accordance with the original trust conditions established by Jonathan Davidson. Cassie leaned forward expectantly, her hand finding Jacob's. This evaluation included review of business decisions, leadership qualities, financial acumen, ethical standards, and innovative thinking, Mr. Thornton continued. External consultants were engaged to provide objective assessment. I could feel tension building in the room. Cassie's expression remained confident, but Jacob was beginning to look concerned. Based on this evaluation, and in accordance with Jonathan Davidson's explicit wishes that the company be led by the heir who best exemplifies the founding values of integrity, innovation, financial responsibility, and ethical business practices, Harold Davidson determined that control of Davidson Properties and associated assets shall pass to. Mr. Thornton paused, looking up from the document to meet Cassie's eyes directly. Amelia Eleanor Harrington. The room went completely silent. Cassie's face froze, her smile faltering and then disappearing entirely. There must be a mistake, she said finally, her voice tight. There is no mistake, Ms. Davidson, Mr. Thornton replied. Your father was quite clear in his determination. The amended will includes a detailed explanation of the evaluation process and findings. This is ridiculous, Jacob interjected. Cassandra has been working at the company for years. Amelia hasn't even been in contact with the family. That is addressed in the addendum, Mr. Thornton said, turning a page. Harold Davidson notes that despite physical distance, Amelia has demonstrated superior business acumen through her work at Next Tech Solutions, where she helped grow company valuation from $10 million to $250 million in 3 years. Her ethical approach to technology development and financial management more closely aligns with Jonathan Davidson's core values. Cassie's face had turned ashen. When was this amendment made? Dad was stressed in his final months. He wasn't thinking clearly. The amendment was executed 23 days before his death, Mr. Thornton replied. Both your parents were evaluated by their physician this same week and found to be of sound mind. Additionally, the trust conditions were not created by your father, but by your grandfather. Your father was simply fulfilling his fiduciary duty as trustee. I don't believe this, Cassie said, her voice rising. Amelia hasn't been part of this family for 3 years. She walked away from everything. She doesn't care about the company or our parents' legacy. That's not accurate, came a voice from the doorway. Everyone turned. I had slipped out during the commotion and now stood in the entrance. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the chance to finally set the record straight. I didn't walk away from the family, I said, stepping into the room. I was pushed out. And when I tried to maintain a relationship on more equal terms, I was systematically isolated. That's not true, Cassie protested, but her voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? I countered. Martha told me Dad tried to contact me multiple times over the past year. Letters I never received. Phone calls to numbers that had supposedly been disconnected. Did you know about those attempts, Cassie? Her eyes darted away. He might have mentioned wanting to reach out. And did you tell him my correct address? Or did you tell him I was moving around a lot and that everything should go through you? Jacob was looking at his wife with dawning comprehension. Cassandra? Did you intercept communications from your parents to Amelia? Cassie's composure was cracking. I was protecting them. She abandoned the family. She would have just hurt them all over again. That wasn't your decision to make, I said quietly. You robbed us all of the chance to reconcile before they died. Mr. Thornton cleared his throat. If I may continue. The will stipulates that Amelia Harrington will assume the position of Chief Executive Officer of Davidson Properties, effective immediately upon acceptance. Cassandra Davidson will retain her current position as Executive Vice President, subject to a 90-day performance review. Cassie stood abruptly. This is a travesty. I'm contesting the will. That is your right, Mr. Thornton acknowledged. However, I should note that your father anticipated this reaction. He left a video statement to be played in the event of a contest. From his briefcase, he withdrew a tablet and placed it on the table. Would you like me to play it now, or would you prefer to reconsider your position? Cassie hesitated, then nodded stiffly. Play it. Mr. Thornton tapped the screen, and my father's face appeared. He looked older than I remembered, more tired, but his eyes were clear and determined. If this recording is being played, he began, it means Cassandra is contesting my decision regarding succession at Davidson Properties. I want to be absolutely clear that this decision was made with full mental capacity and after extensive consideration. He shifted in his chair, leaning closer to the camera. Cassie, I love you. You have many wonderful qualities. But in recent years, I've watched with growing concern as you've made decisions that prioritize short-term gain over long-term stability. The Meridian deal alone demonstrates a willingness to sacrifice the company's future for immediate profit. Cassie's face drained of color. Amelia, if you're watching this, I hope you can forgive an old man's stubbornness. I should have seen years ago what's so clear to me now. You are your grandfather's true heir in spirit and capability. He looked directly into the camera, his expression resolute. My decision stands. It is legally sound and ethically right. It honors Jonathan Davidson's wishes and secures the future of the company he built. The recording ended. The room remained silent for several long moments. Finally, Cassie gathered her purse and stood. This isn't over, she said, her voice shaking with anger. Come on, Jacob. As they headed for the door, Jacob hesitated. He turned back to me with an uncomfortable expression. For what it's worth, I didn't know about the intercepted letters. That was wrong. After they left, Mr. Thornton continued with the remaining provisions of the will. I barely heard him. My mind was reeling from everything that had transpired. My father's belated recognition. My sister's betrayal. The company that was now improbably mine to lead. When the reading concluded and the room cleared, I remained seated, staring at the now dark tablet that had held my father's final message to me. He really did try to make things right, Martha said softly, coming to sit beside me. He talked about you often in those last months. He was proud of what you'd accomplished on your own. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. What will you do now? She asked. It was the question I'd been asking myself since Mr. Thornton had first revealed my father's change of heart. What would I do with this unexpected inheritance? This company I'd been told for years I wasn't suited to lead? I think, I said slowly, I'm going to honor my grandfather's values. And maybe, in doing that, I'll find a way to make peace with my parents' memory too. Martha patted my hand. Jonathan would have been so proud. And Harold and Eleanor, in the end, were too. As I left the office that day, I knew that the real challenge was just beginning. Cassie wouldn't accept defeat easily. The company would need careful guidance through this transition. And I would need to find a way to balance my life in Seattle with this new responsibility in Boston. But for the first time in years, I felt a sense of rightness, of justice, of coming home to myself. The journey ahead would be difficult, but I was finally walking the path I was meant to travel all along. The day after the will reading, I went to the Davidson Properties headquarters in downtown Boston. The receptionist did a double take when I gave my name. Miss Harrington, we weren't expecting you until next week. I thought I'd get an early start, I replied. Is my sister in? Ms. Davidson is in a meeting with the executive team, she said, looking uncomfortable. She said she wasn't to be disturbed. I think she'll want to see me, I said firmly. Could you please let her know I'm here? Minutes later, I was escorted to the large conference room where Cassie sat at the head of a table surrounded by men in expensive suits. She looked up with barely concealed hostility as I entered. We're in the middle of something, Amelia. I can see that, I replied calmly. I'd like to join, considering this appears to be a strategy meeting for the company I now lead. One of the executives, a silver-haired man I recognized as Walter Pierce, the CFO, looked between us in confusion. I thought Ms. Davidson was handling the transition after your parents. There's been a change, I said, taking a seat opposite Cassie. As of yesterday, I am the CEO of Davidson Properties. Mr. Thornton should have sent the official notification this morning. The executives exchanged glances. Cassie's face flushed with anger. This is a temporary situation, she said tightly. There are legal challenges pending, which you're welcome to pursue, I replied. In the meantime, I'd appreciate being included in all executive discussions. Now, what were you discussing before I arrived? Walter cleared his throat. We were reviewing the Meridian proposal for acquiring the waterfront properties. Ah, yes, the Meridian deal. I opened my tablet. I've been reviewing that proposal. Selling those properties at 20% below market value seems questionable at best, especially given Jacob's connection to Meridian's CEO. The room went silent. Cassie's eyes narrowed dangerously. That's a serious accusation, she said. It's not an accusation, it's an observation based on the documents Dad included with the amended will. Perhaps you'd like to explain the business rationale. She couldn't, of course. After an awkward attempt to frame it as a strategic partnership, she abruptly ended the meeting. When everyone else had filed out, she turned on me. You have no idea what you're doing. You're going to destroy everything our parents built. That's ironic, coming from someone who was planning to sell off key assets to her husband's friend at a discount. Those deals were more complex than they appeared on paper. There were considerations you don't understand. Then explain them to me, I challenged. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you were preparing to cash out as soon as you had control. She didn't answer directly. Instead, she gathered her papers with sharp, angry movements. This company has been my life for 10 years. You can't just walk in and take over. I didn't just walk in, I countered. Dad made this decision after careful consideration. After evaluating both of us against grandfather's criteria, Dad was confused and guilty in his final months. You have no idea what he was like after you left. I would have if you hadn't intercepted his attempts to contact me. Her expression flickered. I was protecting him. You were protecting yourself, I said quietly. You knew if we reconciled, your position as sole heir might be threatened. She slammed her portfolio shut. You always thought you were so much smarter than everyone else. So superior. That's why you never fit in. I didn't fit the mold you and our parents created, I corrected. That's different from not fitting in. Before she could respond, there was a knock at the door. Mr. Thornton entered, looking grave. I apologize for interrupting, he said. But there's a matter that requires immediate attention. He placed a folder on the table. These documents were in your father's personal safe. I've only just accessed them. I opened the folder to find a series of emails and financial records. As I scanned them, my blood ran cold. Cassie, what is this? I asked, looking up at my sister. Her face had gone pale. Where did those come from? Your father's records, Mr. Thornton replied. He appears to have been conducting his own investigation in the months before his death. The documents detailed a pattern of financial mismanagement under Cassie's direction. Inflated expense reports, consulting fees to shell companies that traced back to Jacob's family. Most damning of all, evidence she had been secretly negotiating with competitors to sell company assets. You weren't just planning to sell parts of the company, I said, the truth dawning on me. You were already doing it, piece by piece, right under Dad's nose. It wasn't like that, she insisted, but her voice lacked conviction. Then what was it like? I demanded. Because these records suggest you've been systematically undermining the company for your own benefit. She looked away. The business model was outdated. Jacob and I had ideas for modernizing, but Dad wouldn't listen. He was stuck in the past. So you went behind his back. We did what was necessary. Mr. Thornton cleared his throat. Ms. Davidson, these actions potentially constitute breach of fiduciary duty. Your father was preparing to remove you from your position entirely when the accident occurred. That revelation hung in the air between us. Not only had Dad recognized I was better suited to lead the company, he discovered Cassie was actively undermining it. The door opened again, and Jacob entered. The board members are arriving for the emergency meeting, he said, then stopped short when he saw Mr. Thornton. What emergency meeting? I asked. Cassie straightened, composing herself. I called the board to vote on contesting the will and maintaining current leadership during the legal challenge. That won't be necessary, came a voice from the doorway. Walter Pierce stood there with several other board members behind him. We've reviewed the documents Mr. Thornton sent over this morning. The amended will, the evaluation process, and, most concerning, the evidence of financial irregularities under the current executive leadership. Jacob paled. What evidence? Walter placed another folder on the table. Our own audit team has been investigating concerns for months. Your father authorized it, Amelia, though you wouldn't have known. The findings align with the documents in his personal records. He turned to Cassie. The board has voted unanimously to uphold Harold's final wishes regarding succession. Amelia will assume the role of CEO, effective immediately. Cassandra, your position will be reviewed pending a full investigation of these financial discrepancies. Cassie looked around the room, finding no allies. This is a coup, she said bitterly. My sister walks back into our lives after 3 years, and you all just hand her the keys to the kingdom? No one is handing me anything, I said firmly. Dad made his decision based on merit and evidence, just as grandfather intended. The fact that you were actively working against the company's interests only confirms he made the right choice. She gathered her things and headed for the door, Jacob following. At the threshold, she turned back. This isn't over, Amelia. Not by a long shot. After they left, the board members introduced themselves properly. Many had known me as a child but hadn't seen me in years. They expressed confidence in Dad's decision and offered their support during the transition. When everyone else had gone, I sat alone in the conference room, looking out at the Boston skyline. So much had changed in just a few days. I had come back expecting nothing and now found myself responsible for a company that employed hundreds of people and represented my family's legacy. My phone buzzed with a text from Diane. "How's it going? Need an escape plan yet?" I smiled and typed back, "It's complicated, but I think I'm exactly where I need to be." That evening, I returned to the family home, my home now according to the will. Martha was there, having maintained her position as housekeeper through the years of my absence. "I found something you might want to see," she said, leading me to my father's study. On his desk sat a leather-bound journal. "He started writing to you after your falling out," Martha explained. "When he couldn't reach you directly, he put his thoughts here. Said maybe someday you'd read them." I opened the journal with trembling hands. Pages and pages of my father's distinctive handwriting filled the book. Reflections on business decisions. Stories about his early days working with my grandfather. And, most poignantly, his growing realization that he had misjudged me and Cassie all along. October 15th, watched a segment about Next Tech Solutions on CNBC Today. There was Amelia, confidently explaining their innovative approach to ethical data management. In that moment, I saw my father in her eyes, the same passion for doing things the right way, the same clear vision. How did I miss this for so long? November 30th, troubling reports from the audit team about financial irregularities. Cassandra's explanations don't add up. "I fear we've made a terrible mistake in how we've positioned the girls all these years. Jonathan would be disappointed in me." January 10th, met with Edward today about amending the will to align with father's original intentions. It's the right thing to do, though I know it will cause pain and confusion. I only hope I have the chance to explain to Amelia in person, and that somehow she can forgive me. The final entry was dated just 3 days before the accident. "If you're reading this, Amelia, know that your mother and I are deeply sorry for the ways we failed you. We let our own biases and assumptions cloud our judgment. We saw what we expected to see rather than what was actually there. You deserved better from us. The company will be in good hands with you, better hands than it would have been with your sister or even with me. You are Jonathan Davidson's true heir in every way that matters. I hope someday you can forgive us for taking so long to see it." I closed the journal, tears streaming down my face. The reconciliation I had thought impossible had been within reach. My father had seen the truth before the end. It wasn't everything. It couldn't erase years of favoritism and dismissal, but it was something. A foundation to build upon, even if only in memory. Martha squeezed my shoulder gently. "He wanted to make things right. I wish he'd had the chance," I whispered. "He did," she replied. "You're here now. You know the truth. And you have the opportunity to lead the company according to your grandfather's values. That's what he wanted most of all." As I settled into the study that night, surrounded by the books and artifacts of my family's history, I felt a sense of coming full circle. The journey had been painful, the revelations shocking. But through it all, a truth had emerged that no amount of deception could keep buried forever. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Cassie would likely fight the will with everything she had. The company needed careful guidance through this transition. And I had my own life in Seattle to consider. But tonight, I allowed myself to feel the bittersweet triumph of vindication. My father had seen me, truly seen me, before the end. And now I had the chance to honor both his belated recognition and my grandfather's original vision. It wasn't the reconciliation I might have hoped for. But it was, in its own way, a kind of justice. The weeks following the will reading were a whirlwind of activity. As expected, Cassie filed a legal challenge, claiming our father had been unduly influenced and lacked mental capacity when making the amendments. Her lawyers requested a temporary injunction to prevent me from taking control of Davidson Properties while the case proceeded. The hearing was set for a Tuesday morning in early March. I arrived at the courthouse with Mr. Thornton, armed with doctor's evaluations, the video statement, and affidavits from business associates who had interacted with our father in his final weeks. Cassie and Jacob sat on the opposite side of the courtroom, not meeting my eyes. The judge, a stern-looking woman in her 60s, reviewed the documents carefully. "Ms. Davidson," she said finally, "I see no compelling evidence of undue influence or diminished capacity. The medical evaluations are clear. Multiple witnesses have attested to your father's sound mind. And his video statement is particularly convincing." She denied the request for an injunction. It was our first victory, but not the end of the legal battle. Cassie's lawyers indicated they would proceed with the full challenge. 2 days later, however, Walter Pierce requested an urgent meeting. "The audit committee has completed its investigation," he told me in my newly occupied office. "The findings are troubling." The report detailed systematic financial mismanagement under Cassie's direction. Beyond the Meridian deal, they found evidence of kickbacks, inflated contracts with friends' companies, and personal expenses charged to business accounts. "The board believes we should present these findings to your sister before proceeding further," Walter said carefully. "A protracted legal battle would be damaging to the company and the family reputation." I agreed. That afternoon, Cassie and Jacob arrived with their lawyer for what they thought was a settlement discussion. Instead, Walter presented the audit findings. As Cassie's face grew increasingly pale, he explained that if she continued her challenge, the board would be obligated to pursue legal action regarding the financial improprieties. This would likely result in criminal charges, he concluded. Her lawyer, reviewing the documents with growing alarm, whispered urgently in her ear. Jacob looked physically ill. "What do you want?" Cassie asked finally, her voice hollow. I had given this considerable thought. Despite everything, she was still my sister. And while her actions had been reprehensible, I understood the pressure she had lived under, the expectation that she would inherit everything, the fear of disappointing our parents. "I want you to drop the challenge to the will," I said. "In return, I'm prepared to offer you a position in the company, though not as executive VP. You'll work with the development team on specific projects, with oversight." Her eyes widened in surprise. "Why would you do that?" "Because despite everything, you do have skills that could benefit the company. And because I think grandfather would want us to find a way forward that honors his legacy without destroying what's left of our family." She looked away, conflict evident on her face. "And Jacob?" "That's more complicated," I admitted. "Given his involvement in the Meridian deal, I don't see a place for him in the company. But I won't pursue charges if you both cooperate fully with the financial investigation and make restitution for any misappropriated funds." Her lawyer nodded slightly, indicating it was a reasonable offer. After a long silence, Cassie agreed. The papers were drawn up that afternoon. By evening, her challenge to the will was officially withdrawn. With the immediate legal threat resolved, I could finally focus on the company itself. I spent weeks meeting with department heads, reviewing projects, and learning the intricacies of a business I had been told for years I wouldn't understand. What I discovered was that my technology background gave me unique insights into modernizing Davidson Properties. The company had been slow to adopt digital innovations that could streamline operations and open new markets. At my first board meeting as CEO, I presented a vision for the future that honored my grandfather's values while embracing 21st century opportunities. Jonathan Davidson built this company on the principle that property development should enhance communities, not exploit them, I told the board. I want to return to that foundation while using technology to make us more efficient, more responsive to market changes, and more innovative in our approach. The plan included a comprehensive digital transformation, environmentally sustainable building practices, and a commitment to affordable housing components in all new residential developments. To my surprise, the board was enthusiastic. Several members confided that they had been concerned about the company's direction under Cassie's influence. "Your father would be proud," Walter told me after the meeting. This is exactly the kind of forward thinking he was hoping for. Cassie began her new role with obvious reluctance. Our interactions were strained, but professional. Gradually, as she saw her ideas being taken seriously within the parameters of proper oversight, some of the tension eased. One afternoon, about 2 months after the will reading, she knocked on my office door. "Do you have a minute?" she asked, her usual confidence subdued. I nodded, gesturing to the chair opposite my desk. She sat, fidgeting with her watch. I wanted to say, "I'm sorry. For intercepting Dad's letters. For lying about you to the family. For all of it." I studied her face, searching for sincerity. "Why did you do it?" She looked away. "I was scared. All my life, I was told I would inherit the company. It was my identity. Then Dad started talking about you, about how impressed he was with what you'd accomplished on your own. I could see him reconsidering everything. And I panicked. It wasn't a complete excuse, but it was more self-awareness than I'd expected from her. I appreciate the apology," I said finally. "It doesn't erase what happened, but it's a start." She nodded. "Jacob and I are separating. He was a bigger part of the financial issues than I initially admitted. He pushed for the Meridian deal. Said it would set us up for life." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and meant it despite everything. "What will you do now?" "Focus on the work, I guess. Try to earn back some trust." She managed a small, rueful smile. "Maybe learn from my little sister for a change." It wasn't full reconciliation, but it was a beginning. A path toward healing what had seemed irreparably broken. With the family situation stabilizing, I turned my attention to balancing my new responsibilities in Boston with my life in Seattle. After much consideration, I arranged to split my time between the two cities, maintaining my role at Next Tech, while establishing a strong leadership team at Davidson Properties. 6 months after becoming CEO, I launched the Davidson Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to affordable housing initiatives and community development in underserved areas. It was my way of honoring my grandfather's values while creating something new. At the foundation's inaugural event, I stood at the podium looking out at faces both familiar and new. Business associates of my parents. Old family friends. My team from Seattle who had flown in to support me. Even Cassie, sitting quietly in the back row. Jonathan Davidson believed that success in business should translate to strengthening communities, I told the audience. That profit without purpose was empty. That innovation should serve human needs, not just financial goals. The Davidson Foundation will carry those values forward into a new generation. After the speeches and the champagne toasts, I found myself alone in my father's, now Maya, study. On the desk sat my grandfather's portrait alongside a photo of my parents on their wedding day. I had added a third frame, the sailing photo from Maine, the 4 of us smiling in the sunshine before everything fractured. Martha found me there, lost in thought. "They would be proud," she said softly. "All 3 of them. Even after everything that happened?" She nodded. "Your parents made mistakes. Serious ones. But in the end, your father recognized the truth. And your mother, for all her blind spots, loved you both. She would have come around eventually." I wasn't entirely convinced of that, but I appreciated her kindness. "What about you?" she asked. "Are you finding peace with all of this?" I considered the question carefully. "I'm getting there. The company is thriving. The foundation is launching. Cassie and I are working on it." I smiled slightly. It's not the life I imagined for myself, but maybe it's the one I was meant to have all along. Martha squeezed my hand. "Your grandfather used to say that the most important legacy isn't buildings or bank accounts. It's the difference you make in people's lives. You're honoring that legacy beautifully." As she left me to my thoughts, I turned to the window overlooking the Boston skyline. The city lights twinkled in the gathering dusk, a constellation of possibilities. My journey had been complicated, painful at times. The reconciliation I had hoped for with my parents had come too late in one sense, but perhaps just in time in another. Through their belated recognition, I had found my way to a new chapter, one that honored the past while creating something uniquely my own. I thought of my father's final journal entry. You are Jonathan Davidson's true heir in every way that matters, not because of DNA or birth order, but because of values, vision, and integrity. That was the true inheritance, one that couldn't be written in a will or contested in court. The path forward wasn't perfect or easy. There were still wounds to heal, relationships to rebuild, challenges to overcome. But for the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. What about you? Have you ever had a moment when life took an unexpected turn that ended up leading you exactly where you needed to be? Drop a comment below and share your story. And if you found something valuable in my journey, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of family, redemption, and finding your true path. Thank you for walking this road with me today. I'm grateful for each and every one of you.